gonna get started. So nice to see you all here. This is, I'm really excited for kicking off our fall season tonight. What you laughing at? And yeah, it's actually a really exciting season because we're beginning to usher in our 50th anniversary, which is next year. 50 is a pretty heavy, it's a pretty monumental achievement, being a very, very tiny artist-run organization in the Bay over waves of change over 50 years. I find it pretty remarkable that my predecessors have kept this thing going and that we're still here. So we are working on some really exciting programs and projects, so keep an eye on all that. And we're also going to be rolling out lots of historical material and archive stuff, much more info to come. So you'll just keep that. So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to give a couple of thank yous. Noah Ross has been really instrumental in helping me set up this reading and lots of other programs coming up. So thank you, Noah, and thanks, Kevin, for running our live stream and doing our tech so smoothly and great. And thank you to et al. For hosting us. Thanks to all of you. Really excited for this reading. I'm not gonna read their bios at you. You can access them on our website to learn more about our readers. I'm gonna let them take the floor and share their work with you, give them the most time possible. So we have Gia Gonzales coming here from New York, and then Muriel Leung, who's here from Los Angeles, but formerly a longtime Bay Area resident. And we'll conclude with Jocelyn Saidenberg, who is also a neighborhood, right here in the neighborhood, and also a former director of Small Press Traffic, one of my forebears. So, and keep an eye out for all of our programs coming up. This fall is stacked. Workshops happening. Robert Kluck will be reading in November. Alice Notley's coming to town in November. All kinds of great stuff. So, thank you all for coming, and let's welcome Gia.
Hi, everybody. It's really exciting to be here. I was, it's my first time in the Bay for real, so I'm learning a lot, and I had my first. Actually, I don't know. I feel like such a lame saying all this. I had my first mission burrito just now. So that was fun. Yeah, I don't know. Just thank you again for. Having me. Thank you for, thanks to Noah and Sid and to Small Press Traffic. And I'm really excited to be reading with Muriel and Jocelyn. And it's really great to see my Nightboat colleagues in person because we work over Zoom. So I was thinking, I have too much in my hands right now, but I was thinking I would start with just like some drafts and excerpts that I'm working on right now, which is kind of it's my self-titled, Gia Gonzales by Gia Gonzales, and it's very much in progress, and it's still, I'm so sorry, it's coming along. It's hard not to be Gia, a self primed for astringency or sweetness. No, Gia's not the locus of production. She is that aforementioned sweetness. Gia Gonzales is a poisoner based in New York City, where she was born. But I think she is just a girl in a fallacy of good fortune. Who was she? The muff eater, and her camel coat and her caramel skin, and her raven black hair and superfluous ring. I saw Gia belligerent with drink, and I pitied her. She was, at her best, a talent of reciprocity, and syntax was her corsage. My name is Gia, but Gia is a kind of misnomer. Having appropriated your manner, Gia is a squatter in your day. Gia Gonzales is an experiment in form which took the shape of a Filipina aged 27 years old. She was just a girl who wrote, "It's hard not to be Gia, a self primed for astringency or sweetness." Gia cups my cock in one hand softly. She comes to mortify me in plain garters. My appendage is her derision. Her derision is my spleen of love. Beneath my hand is Gia's cunt. She's with me now. I observe her wan smile. I would grab her foot to suck lavishly. I would double the size of our bush. And Gia would seek my asshole with her tongue, pointed sometimes probing, or flatly lapping as I ride, for she loved to be in that place, huffing me. My elastic waistband bears her name. Couched in the fortnight of her dank swoon, what I yearned for was her coinage, that glittering tender. She who'd grease my palm with it, the ching-ching of life's big grandiosity. I could be that pasture of forms and delusions in which Gia ran freely, doggish for my love. For syntax was Gia's pompadour. Feverish, I practice my language making, pleasantries mastered in quick reflex. A mind limbed in green perceived the bobbed hair black and blunt, meaning the table, the upholstery, sheened in plastic, clocked her easily. Bergen County. The pig's strangled head, its cooked tongue displayed through open jaws was that aperture of memory through which Gia was sung, "Oh, pretty woman," observing her own hair being combed and braided. As a child, Gia wore satiny dresses embellished with rhinestones, played the violin unprodigiously, and of that dress she wore was told a story by her school principal about Gia's mother, who had labored to create this dress for Gia's recital despite the meager reserves of her family. And it amazed Gia, this story, seeing as her mother had not, in fact, created the dress, but had bought it for $20 from an online Chinese bridal store. Yes, imprinted on the backs of Gia's eyes were little green crosshatches of fabric hanging ethnically on Gia's bedroom wall. And a hall of linoleum with incense fluorescent lights is that place to which she cannot return. She dreamt she wrote in a script so cryptic and loping, moving like time does when she fucks. It's what happens between the dishes that is her marauding, a volumizing lash product in her hair pattern. Varietals of cereal, giddy Gia through one long blur of present moment stretching into now. And so on this day, do I pledge to be her, Gia, a pattern of patterns like a box of Triscuits. Belief in oneself is that delusion enabling the continuation of oneself, it's so, etc. And so a feeling of disregard overtook me, the way a wafting scent of tulips, roses might. And then I think the next poem I'm going to read is an older, untitled poem. I guess I'm calling it Returning Myself. Returning myself, my eye to my eye, my face to my face, I noticed I was in a quiet, spacious, and white-walled apartment, adorned by undulating sun in an aquatic pattern. My apartment. At present, there were no cedary smells, just a roundish lack of novelty. I swing my feet in this uncharged and limited space. Throat returned to my throat, throat returned to my throat, chin returned to my chin, cheek returned to my cheek, 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 nose returned to my nose, brow returned to my brow, eye returned to my eye, eye returned to my eye. The joy, of course, is that each room has utility. And then my nerve struck me, and I was bedded with a magisterial sense of dread. At night, winnowing illusion into little shapes, gnarly forms, hunger striping the stomach, willing this room's gestation into tomorrow. These pains erase the day. Then the round and cloying smell of skin in sleep headily fills me. Spread, return to my spread, spread, return to my spread, clench, return to my clench, clench, return to my clench, clench, return to my clench, anus, return to my anus, anus, return to my anus, anus, return to my anus, groin, return to my groin, groin, return to my groin, groin, return to my groin, breath, return to my breath. This morning, my status is uncouth, feeling miraculous, or this is one way to put it, flouncies lacking the correct timbre. Okay, now just ministrations on the body, back to the body. Distance between my knee and that chair is known. Distance between my nipple and that chair is known. Distance between crown of my inclined head and that chair is known. A downward pull on an upright body is known. I want to be the first to know. All letters, indeed, are bolded in my inbox. Perspirations a kindly sheen on me all through the day. My inability to portend is what keeps it propulsive, angling the nail for surer entrance. Okay, let's begin on this note of sureness. Well, now the entrance is overwrought with nothing meager following. This is hardly an image of animalistic devotion to one another. I was crowded in my perception of joy. Passing through a pane of bleeding light, what saw falsely, a square outlasting its folds writ large. In creamy false shadow became a method of expulsion, each white opacity, more infuriating than the next. You make a way out. Walking through, you're roomed with clarity, feigning coy, playing pleasure, making shadow in the other room. Your pose means chaste luxury as gauze becomes a demarcating factor and the edge unfinished becomes its own and larger subject. Yeah, I haven't read that one in a while. I'm kind of remembering it now, and I'm like, damn, I don't know. Should I read that one? I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. This chapbook came out earlier this year with Portable Press at Yo-Yo Labs, RENDER SLEAZE. And I had written a poem, I think it was maybe actually my first published poem, a sort of longish poem where it was sort of an attempt to write about sleaze as a genre in film, and then maybe trying to track it in writing. I don't know. I never really ended up finishing it. But Brenda Ijima, the publisher, approached me and wanted to publish the poem as a chapbook. But it wasn't, I think I wanted to expand upon it because it had been a while since I'd written that poem. And so I'd recently discovered that in the 70s, there was a very sort of thriving exploitation film production business in the Philippines, with a lot of American exploitation filmmakers coming to the Philippines, as a way of exploiting labor, basically, in the Philippines, really supporting that out of a desire to sort of create a place for themselves in the cultural landscape. And I think they're just incredibly messy, toxic films, and a lot of it's so much to get into right now, honestly. I mean, they're really just these insane nightmare fantasies of American women like exiled in like the Filipino prisons, and Pam Grier is their like lesbian matriarch, and she has a BDSM dungeon, and like, but I don't know. I was like, maybe it'll be kind of fun watching these films. They're not actually that fun. Yeah, and there's a lot of. It's just so messy. I think a lot of Filipino filmmakers who became involved were sort of like seeing their relationship to like producing these films as like a form of like racial passing. It's like, it was just like, it felt a little bit a lot to take on, and I kind of felt myself getting pretty exhausted with the project pretty fast. But it did, I did end up writing some poems based on watching this film trilogy called Women in Cages. You know, nothing hidden there, by Roger Corman. So yeah, this is a series of poems called The Butch, the Naive, and the Mousy Pinay. Oh my God, I am schwitzing. It's so hot. Green, scared, and pretty. Oh, also there's chapbooks available in the back if anyone would be interested. Oh, thank you. Green, scared, and pretty. There's a red-white disambiguation in the virgin landscape, my little white doll who bathes in tainted water. Yet something of self-knowledge, the unworried concoction of aerosoled hair, gaudies the tableau. An ecstasy of shock on the colonial caning. The butch, the naive, and the mousy pinay surrounding her aroused her white agony, cut to the butch who wipes her finger on her shirt. Beyond the pale. Of her complexion, she was taught that with it, this green goes. She was built like a tank in drabs, and her face was undone, though the unbecoming mark upon it was popularly said to indicate beauty. The rich landscape aflame cheaply. So paid, the brown boy was made to throw himself with vigor against the glass, a carabao chewing distantly on a long frond. By this logic, first defiled, then exploded, is a fate not so much to be pitied as depended on. Their end goal of failure. Gleaming sheets of straight black hair, under which two twins labor aimlessly in the loamy, sucking dirt. Meanwhile, the blonde speaks, with breath and enunciation of solitary, to the overwrought Teuton. In a bamboo cage. Clasping her arms around her knees, she signaled to herself and to others the perceived superfluousness of her presence. What she did was bounce in transport on the haphazard wagon. She drank them under the table. Was it her exceptional body which permitted her to do so? Of all the things I might have expected, was it the sexlessness of her fatigues, her androgyny? He had that Neanderthal look to begin with, natively disturbing plants for food, whose indistinguishable mass of bitter leaves repulsed the pinched-nosed prisoner. A good ass up in smoke. So flame destroys the indecorous femme who had, in pigtails, allowed herself to be led behind a curtain, a drab sheet, and grovel maudlinly, who made a body spectacle and could demonstrate the terror of her own defilement by allowing herself merely to be positioned in the foreground, where she was drank or swallowed up as easily as milk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gia, for that. And thank you so much to everyone at Small Press Traffic for organizing this event today. It's so great to have a reason to come back to the Bay and to also, be invited to support Gia's arrival, I love Nightboat so much, and but I will be reading from something that's outside of the book today. Just not to say I don't love Imagine Us the Swarm, but because on the topic of sleaze and sex, and I have been working on a new project, and so it's I've been writing accounts of dates I've been on for the past year or so, and which, as you can imagine, as in the world of 21st century modern dating, is both horrendous and also great literary source material. So it's been also an exercise too in trying to, as close as possible, record something in real time. So I'll be reading a couple of excerpts from that today. For the record, if not for the habit of this accounting, I would be awash in the sea of my own unforgiving feeling. I told some friends of mine I am going to write a book about trying, which is the same to me as a book about love. Whether consolation or searing truth, they responded, it is remarkable how you keep on. On effort, I cooked an elaborate dinner of salmon, garlicky greens, and turmeric rice for R on the day he came by to end our relationship. He ate every grain and buttery piece of fish of his meal before standing up to make this declaration. Our conversation lasted no more than 20 minutes, which largely consisted of his praise of my most idealistic qualities, and which were no different than the attributes of a Macy's mannequin. To my embarrassment, it took longer than 2 weeks to stop loving him. On dating, which requires effort, which requires love of, if not oneself, then the promise of one's ability to do so for another, to be fully successful. Astounding how many people date with multiple to no objectives, all coalescing in a shared desire for relief. This is the conclusion I have come to as a seasoned dater of people. The following is a record of dates transpiring the course of a year following the breakup with R, whose prominence in my life I feel assured would only diminish in time, in which the expansiveness of my loving in the present tense would make way for reparative experiences. Faith I have in plenty, discernment a work in progress. My one determination, I will love as wildly as I can and live to tell it. The date. We had been exchanging messages. It is the 21st century, and this is how every modern dating story appropriately begins. A month prior, R had left me before I was ready, and then when I decided I was, I turned to M. We had been discussing cephalopods. The largest octopus to date is known to be at least 15 feet long. The cuttlefish can change its colors. A squid has 3 hearts. Voice messages left at odd hours of the day. No tremor when he speaks, whereas I am constantly wavering. The way he says, you and I can tell we're gonna have a lot of fun. At the arcade, 3 rounds of skee ball where I lost. A wager to fulfill, I danced languidly, sinking myself into his lap, the way water falls into oblivion, his mouth, my neck, a slow plucking of strings. Security walks by, discontent. We gather ourselves, scheming to return to mine. He greets the black and white photograph of my great-grandparents at my altar, brimming with ash, his back bent in reverence. In front of them, he slides his hand down my pants, circling the pool of me with 2 precise fingers. Pluck, pluck. He lifts me towards his mouth, drinking me in. His body, much smaller than ours, I bat away the missing. He finishes before I can. This is not unusual. The shimmer of his cum on my chest. Sometimes I enjoy sleeping in it, I confess. He grimaces as if he has never worn someone else's wet as a crown. After he leaves the next morning, neither of us reaches out. The date. Despite swearing to never date another poet I make an exception for F, whose profile features a clipping from an Emily Dickinson poem. I am nobody, who are you, I write him. He's tickled by it under the assertion that no one reads anymore in the Bay. I tell him it is not even my best plagiarized material, though if he cared to hear more in person, I would be happy to share. An old school punk, F possesses essences of my ex, C, whose stick and poke tattoos outnumber the amount of furniture he owns. F has a primary partner and a metamor who happens to also be partnered with his primary. As polyamorous dating goes, a narrative of enmeshed relations can read like an elaborate joke, so I relish my freedom as a floater among people, untethered for the moment, though still yearning to be kept in some ways. F and I kiss beneath a tree under my shameless prompting. At some point, he reaches to hold my hand, and then upon realizing the intimacy of this gesture, he pulls away. In the days after, I leave for the Sequoias, a trip intended for R and I, in which I now proceed ahead with a group of friends. At the end of a long hike, we reach a clear lake and snow-topped mountains baked by the sun overhead. A photo from the day shows us shimmering with sweat, but thoroughly satisfied with ourselves. It is the longest duration in which I have not thought about R. When I return to cell service, I receive a note from F, who apologizes with some devastating news. His primary partner has embarked on a more serious love journey with the metamor during what I presume to be a less than sober revelation at Burning Man. Poor guy. To my friend beside me when I received the message, I told you that no good can ever come out of going to Burning Man. F will need some time to himself, but concludes that I am both beautiful inside and out, the lamentations of what might have been. I am moved by what feels like an unnecessary but kind addition to an otherwise unfortunate set of news to relay. Out of solidarity with him, I now most ardently refute the virtues of Burning Man. The date. Because the advent of digital calendars leave room for greater margins of error, I show up accidentally an hour early for my date with N, who, unfairly to herself, takes the blame and rushes over to meet me. My punctuality becomes a punchline for the duration, though mostly N talks about herself, mainly in third person. N has been working on self-care, on parenting herself. N has been reading books about attachment styles and navigating relational trauma and polyamorous dating. I guessed her attachment style quickly, though she has yet to pinpoint mine. In a sense, I admire this devotion to one's inner life, the way I once spent months sifting through these same topics after my breakup with D, where I ate nothing but milkshakes for a month and lost 15 pounds. When I returned to solids, I saw the patterns of this ache more clearly, the wildness of Dee's heart, which I loved, but which would only leave me to husk. Again, it was they who left me. I stayed in a room for months before I discovered there was a door. To N's point about self-growth, I point out that we're oversaturated by ways of self-diagnosing what ails us. At what point do we leave the scrutiny behind and learn our tiny pleasures? I try to name mine, but N brings it back to herself. To N's surprise, I tell her that we may be better off as friends, which does not negate the fact of her beauty, the soft soap smell of her when she comes in for a hug. Weeks later, we arrange a time to meet for drinks. She cancels by way of accidentally sending a message intended for another, and it becomes clear that my role is fodder for her other love affair that I do not wish to be part of. Everywhere, a door. I exit through all of them. The last one, which is not a date. but a call. I once declared that I would marry B. This I announced to everyone else who was not B, and reveled in the humor of it. We had been friends for years, sometimes lovers. The first time, fools moved by the clarity of water and late-night talks of Paul Salon in an arts residency, as one does. Our collective nude, a pile on the floor. Since then, I believed that he had loved me dearly, even as we're busy loving other people. It was his deliberateness that moved me. Once, he held me from behind in his kitchen so softly I felt like an egg. We sang riotous songs during an impromptu karaoke night, closing upon each other in a duet of Purple Rain. My book sat on his altar beside his life's most important things. I told him once, love persists and love is cruel. I swore I saw him cry for me. On a call one morning, he tells me that he has met Elle in his home country and they are to be married. Such is the way of immigration law, which features one restriction after another, that to truly begin their joint lives, they must offer themselves up to the state. I recall once over a plate of hummus that B had wondered openly what it would be like to be closer to his home country, and now I understand his answer lies in a person. I want that for him very ardently. Some envy on my end, unsure if it is over the loss of him to another or the fact that he's moved on before me. But my rudderlessness should never be his concern, my jealousy like a petty stone. And besides, I can keep him in some ways where he lives now at the corner of a lonely ventricle, showing me the path of where blood flows. Listen, it's just marriage, I tell him when he expresses some worry. The arrogance of it, I know. And this life is shorter than we know it. We might live our whole life not knowing, every action a pursuit of some collective truth. Love a step forward. I tell him this, I tell myself. The cord between us blinking red. Tomorrow it will be a different color. It is possible to love like this, a lightness and a bell. Thank you, B, I tell him. You have given me so much. Thank you.
Wow. So great to be reading with you, Gia and Muriel. I'm like still so much in the experience of these readings. I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? But here I am. So first thing, I want to thank Small Press Traffic, Noah and Sid, and all the people that make Small Press Traffic for inviting me to read, and to thank et al. For hosting this event, and Kevin for live streaming. It's great to be in this space. Do I sound okay? Okay. If you've been in this space before, you will understand why I'm asking this question. Okay, so I think it was my friend Chris Nagler who introduced me to this short story, probably like many, many years ago. I'm pretty sure it was Chris. And the story is The Burrow by Franz Kafka. And I became obsessed with this story, as I do become obsessed with stories. And then, like in the second year of the pandemic, I taught myself cursive, like 19th century cursive. And so then I copied out The Burrow in cursive with my non-dominant hand. And that was kind of like an amazing experience. And in part, it was me thinking about like the kind of wavy line between legible and illegible mark making. And then I thought, oh, there are some questions here that I really like and I want to write with, and questions around belonging and sort of what I've come to call the inside-outside problem. So this project emerges from that, and I have many epigraphs, because I really like epigraphs. It's like you've invited all your friends from books to be like, your company, so it's not as lonesome. So I have only 3 for tonight. And I'm like, why these friends? But well, here we have them. Urns are containers, Barbara Johnson. True, some ruses are so subtle they defeat themselves. I know that better than anyone. And it is certainly a risk to draw attention by this whole to the fact that there may be something in the vicinity worth inquiring into. Franz Kafka. Here's the thing, that the both and turned into a neither nor does not mean it was a bad idea to try. Lauren Berlant. Does this still sound okay? Okay. If and elsewhere, also outside. At the crossroads, a wayward gesture forwarding us on to a selfsame burrow, waiting for those who describe. This burrow's night, or the hourless place, or the unplaced hour, or indirection, or out of place and in time with, or whenever holed up with bee, in bee's home, bees or bee's burrow, or bee's her, along with us being P and me. Our burrow, practicing at origins, and like that. Bee's dwelling, this burrow, she occupies much thought, also much planning, and all expensive energy is the understatement she details. Save for the momentary subterranean stillness, though inexorably broken by her own deception, by her owning description and intersections. For, if B be growing old, be getting on, not as strong as most as the others, those others, not an us, not a her either, but in particular those who are all enemy are countless, not even excepting the tiny ones, insignificant pips, whose work B benefits from, for in slender ways devouring just enough and no more. Wherefore, our motto, once being B's mantra, may we be omnia contra omnis. May we both unthing our abode and belong there. She who gestures and who signals, if ever possible, in the consummation of burrowing, Bean's own home, but not yet, she signals. The making of us. In reflection and in sleep, loosening B towards those poor wanderers who we once were, B, P, and me, the exceptions so beings exerted from them having become the we who then became an us, a B and a P and a me. Along the forest paths, along the distant roadways, and in the woods deep within our woods, describing not those others or these elses, those wood-wandering them who must crawl into piles of leaves for relief from the cold, who piled up with bands of comrades, there yet unawares delivered all the perils and threatening forms from within and without, in concert, symbiotically, witlessly waiting. This is what P will describe in precious detail when next we meet, and I then will record for B, incising while next and then forcing the lines into which and not who. Fearing words. But as B well knows, and as B has recounted to me so often and to P, the others are not only just outside, or also those whose elements is B's very homestead, just as much as B's and B's fearing being equally theirs, more, no less than ours or anybody else's. For this, then, is what most needs describing, already from the first word, fearing words as words, fear, casting out letters here, there, lest all be lost, which is not already a loss or worth the losing. Experimental burrow. B digs one. Obviously far from the real one, her entrance. B digs it B-size. P and I observe that B seems to be digging our own graves, quietly giggling nice and snug in our beds, lined and sealed, of course, with moss, just like the real one is. Creeping in to close it, covering it completely, B sleeps under B's mossy air-shirts blanket. Later, B patiently watches, B waits, B's private vigilance, long and short spells at every and any hour, day and night. We have seen this move in the past, before, being B, P, and me. We wait nonetheless with great excitement for the instant, that moment, when B flings off the moss and rises from B's experimental hole. It never disappoints. No, never. When B shares observations from the experiment, they're mixed, good and bad. So we debate, we weigh, we elaborate, we iterate, we play out different scenes, games, and dramas with which forms, fits, matters, moorings, anchors, and landings. All our rotting and obliging matters. Their magnetism and elasticity are exciting. When B looks with inattentiveness at the phrases we three ourselves, we three find ourselves susceptible, ungovernably fucked, and happy. B pants, puffs, bustles. We ignore what we can't contest. B's observations from the Burrow experiment, always beyond a yes or no, akin to our games of plus and minus. Bidding starts with an ask of or for, a bid as appeal. The game's literally not possible or just the literal play for our snug hiding parts. Today we call our game the impasses. Here the pluses and minuses correlate nicely. Here the winner loses to win, also nicely. Also known as the game of exceptions to imaginary problems and their solutions. What a fellowship of anomalies we are. Fellows sitting around our experimental burrow, dot connecting like a discipline for living, from so-and-so to so-and-so, where self-explanation is thankfully nothing, where compulsive naming meets at a bullseye's resisting determination, shadow explanations oscillating with wind-tossed moss and marginal details and with the dust of the world. Bending outside to in, then back. It pleases B by equal measures to narrate who and what remains, whose ruins, what demise, where faintness, who murmurs without returning, the remaining, the detouring like echoes into winds, like sighing at grief's disposal, that passivity I suggest, while P nods assent to this abstention. B prefers to decide upon what I never had to have or even had to, abdicating long ago, then the working out of abandoning, of relinquishing, that refusal that refuses to refuse. But that's not to B's taste. With these stores and piles to accord, to reckon, and to account, bent in reply, B says, let time take its time. In a whisper, B says, the hours seduce our ears. Where hours separate the bones from us, that is, the hours could destroy all with ease and everything without risk to what the hours are. Led by B's renunciation of B's own, our us, arbitrarily alterating plots to suit the ends, likewise times and hours. And here I lapse alongside my friend bed. Here I lapse alongside my friend B to admire the theory, brilliant and flimsy. But then P summons me with an invitation not to be snubbed. This is how denial precipitates the bones of catastrophes elaborated by B, that detour to turn without return, and I reply. Got a head nod from Evan, so I feel like I'm doing okay. The enemy. We agree bees are myriad, And we all affirm the enemies and their accomplices are still more numerous. We admit are countless, multiplying so that B becomes dizzy, who in a rare retreat lapses alongside P and me where no alarm could alert us now. May there be hours in which that enmity might be assuaged, when B raises above destruction, moves sideways to harm, plays dead in an instant, freezes to memorial still. But no, we know false assurance is the greatest risk, a threat greater than the multiple perils calculating and figuring together the enemies, their allies, accomplices in some. What profitless hope for steadfast protection if we were to be so assured and not in this half experiment, half enigmatic ground where we three, B, P, and I, want only to watch over ourselves, over B and P and me, where we be omnia and omnis alternatingly. And now, momentarily, I'm worried about B, who hasn't been seen above or below ground, nowhere covering in her coverings. The last time B did show, did come through the familiar forest pathway, I made things, P fears, worse, with my attempt to converse and to follow, unintending to pursue, lest seeming I feared to be signaling some threat or untoward action vis-a-vis B, pardon me, pardon P, neither pursuing nor fleeing. This is the last one I'll read. Hymn to our enclave or the she-burrow's altar. If you were to arrive on ground, in trees, in air, you of chance, you of particular, you who would follow B, P, or me out of your filthy curiosity, who would be kin to all species omnia, who be contra omnis, who against B and P and me. Or if, just as bad, you be a bee-like being, no, really worse, being like us, lovers and prizers, but still being some filthy little connoisseur of a scoundrel you would be if you were, in all your obscenity and longing, if you were to find our entrance. If you were to arrive on ground, in trees, in air, and if you were to find out, work out where and how to lift, if you would, our moss-covering, blankety moss, and if success were to favor you and your arrival on ground, in trees, in air, if you were to wriggle into our abode in lieu of P, or me, properly, until only your behind should show, still we, if all this would be, would cast all prudence off and would rush at you, would leap on you, would maul you, tear all of you from yourself, would debone you, destroy you, and would swill your blood, property, and fluid of you, would toss whatever of your remains with the rest of our spoils. You would, if you were to arrive on ground, in trees, in air, we do repeat, would do us the greatest of pleasures. For B, P, and me would be at last back inside, within, not without. Yes, within the without, together, once more and for good. We'd be greeting the halls, passages, corners, storerooms, cubbies, hidey holes, dens, nests, lairs, closets, warrens, nooks, and recesses, even the she-burrow labyrinths with rapture. But you don't come. Nobody does. We make a hobby of prowling. We curl up inside. We eulogize margins and thoroughfares, minor and major. But you do not arrive, not on ground, not in trees, not in air. Thank you.
I second an Evan head nod for that. I really second that heartily. Can we give one more round of applause for all of our great readers today? Gia, Muriel, and Jocelyn, thank you. And thank you to et al. For hosting us tonight. We love et al. We really appreciate the space. I felt very on the inside, thinking about the inside-outside questions, so snug in this reading. So I think it's my job to welcome you to the outside at this point. We've got books for sale in the back. Hang out, talk to us. Erin will ring you up if you'd like to buy some books. But keep in touch. We've got a bunch of great events coming up this season, and we look forward to seeing you at more readings soon. Thanks for coming.